Good afternoon, and welcome to Brunch and Budget on Bonfire Radio with your host, Pamela Capallet, a certified financial planner here to help take the bite out of your budget, brunchandbudget.com. I'm your sound provider, Dialect, and here's your host, Pamela Capallet.
Thank you, Dialect, and thank you, everybody, for tuning in today. We are going to be talking about something that I feel like we talk about a lot, but now we actually have a phrase for it. It's called survivorship bias.
Survivorship bias. What kind of bias is that?
I know, right?
I mean, you get to be right because you survived. Is that what's up with that?
Yeah, that's actually kind of it. It's this idea that you survived and you don't see who fails. So the people who talk about their success, the ones who survive, are the ones who like, well, you can do it too if you did exactly what I did. And the thing that sparked this really was an article on SJO.com. It's this guy named Sol Orwell who wrote a piece called Don't Let Gurus Sell You on Survivorship Bias. And he referenced this pretty amazing XKCD comic. I just want to read it because I think it explains survivorship bias in just the most perfect way. There's this guru on stage with bags of money drawn around him. And he's saying, never stop buying lottery tickets, no matter what anyone tells you. I failed again and again, but I never gave up. I took extra jobs and I poured money into those tickets. And here I am, proof that if you put in the time, it pays off. Just replace lottery tickets with anything else you've ever heard somebody like this say.
I love XKCD. Genius. Yeah, they're crazy webcomic. If you haven't checked it out, a lot of it is like super deep math. I don't get half of it, so don't feel bad if you don't get half of it either.
There's actually a XKCD wiki because of how crazy and deep it is.
Well, and to talk about, the specifics and to get granular about it, the term bias is not being used in a colloquial manner here. I know a lot of times when we say bias, we mean likes one thing more than the other. But that's not actually what bias means in this case.
This is it's bias in terms of like the statistical probability psychological bias.
Well, in terms of what it is, what it means is your brain will have a tendency to remember one thing more often and forget another thing. For instance, like this is a typical type of bias. People often, I forget what the name of this is, but most people have heard of this tendency. If you miss the bus every 1 out of every 10 times you try to catch the bus, that's that person you always hear complaining, oh, I miss the bus all the time.
I missed the bus again.
They forget that most of the time they make the bus.
Right.
That's the bias that we're talking about here in the head.
Yes, exactly. But before we jump into survivorship bias in the world, let's do a little investment appetizer.
What's the investment appetizer about?
Investment appetizer. It's the food before you eat your food.
Investment
for your brain.
It's an investment for your brain.
The investment appetizer is also survivorship bias. So this is a real thing in the investment world as well. And it's kind of fucked up. So Investopedia has a great explanation of it. And so it's basically the tendency for mutual funds with poor performance to be dropped by mutual fund companies because of poor results. So they get absorbed or the mutual fund itself dissolves. And what this does is only the mutual funds that have done well survive. And so it makes a mutual fund company's performance look better when they shut down bad mutual funds.
That sounds really cutthroat.
They've manufactured survivorship bias. It's like this deliberate thing. Another way they use survivorship bias is failed companies aren't excluded in performance studies because they're gone and they failed. So really, performance is based on only the companies that have succeeded.
So break that down a little bit. Performance studies, what's going on here?
Yeah, so basically, performance studies are if a company fails, if a company goes bankrupt, if they're gone from the market, right? They're gone from the stock exchange, then they're not factored into the overall performance of the market because technically they don't exist. But they existed at one time. But that failure, that like big zero, gets erased instead of being counted as part of the performance.
So when we're looking at how well the market overall, the S&P or the whatever, over the course of the year, we look at all the companies. And if there's any company, no matter how long they've been around, that shuts down completely over the course of that year, all of their numbers just get taken out of the
Yeah, well,
equation.
Enron, Lehman, they're not considered as part of the stock market performance anymore.
So what does that mean in the real world? So there's a performance evaluation. It doesn't exist. They cut it out. It looks different. So what does that mean?
Yeah, so what tends to happen is the results of these studies tend to be skewed higher. Now, in something like mutual fund companies, where a mutual fund company just gets rid of their bad mutual funds and only keeps their good ones, for us as investors, what if they had 10 good ones and 100 bad ones, but we only see the 10 good ones?
Okay, so what's going on there is it's basically a way of cooking the books and making it look like their riskier investments are way less risky than they are.
Yeah, or their bad investments never existed in the first place.
Oh, yeah, so it just looks like, even our worst record is okay investments. We don't have any ones that tank.
Yeah, because they merge them or get rid of them or fold them into the good ones.
One question about this, and this is cool if you don't know this because this isn't quite your specialty, but if this is a thing that everybody does, then doesn't everybody know? Doesn't it take away the advantage when you're looking at the numbers?
You're right. I don't know the answer to that.
Well, I'm going to guess. Is it cool if I'm going to guess because I
we'll all speculate.
I know
today.
as much as you do. Well, I think it's kind of this. People are guessing. Folks don't know about finance, so they go and speak to somebody, and they don't know if they're being BS'd or not.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, and it's interesting because I guess it's not necessarily that survivorship bias is manufactured in the financial industry necessarily, as we don't take into account the failures. The failures become invisible, and only the successes rise to the top.
Well, I would have to say, I mean, the stock market is the biggest examples or the easiest examples of survivorship bias, because we talk about this all the time when people are talking about how you invest. The idea of having a diversified portfolio means you have tens of thousands of stocks invested, but all anyone ever talks about is being the smart one to have bought 1,000 shares of Apple back in the day when they were a penny.
Right, and that's survivorship bias, because that was just luck. That's the one you remember, and that's the one you talk about. You don't talk about that other stock that totally tanked and that you lost all your money on.
Right.
You only talk about the good stuff. And I think one way that Investopedia, I like the way that they put it, is many losing funds are closed and merged into other funds to hide poor performance. This is an important issue to take into account when analyzing past performance. So that's also how this affects your funds, essentially, and that's how this affects your investments, is if you're trying to analyze the mutual fund company itself, and again, they close 100 bad stocks or merge them with the good ones, or 100 bad mutual funds and merge them with the good ones, then how do you really know how the company is really doing? Because they're not required to report their failures.
That's so crazy.
I know, right? Survivorship bias. It's real everywhere. So we're talking about it today, and I think it's an important conversation because we are all told. I mean, the bootstrap story, the American dream story. We've spent so much time on this podcast talking about that, and the idea of like pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. This idea that we all kind of live in this vacuum or in this silo where we all start from the same place and have the same opportunities. So, I just worked hard and that's how I made it. And this implication that I worked hard and I'm here, which means that you didn't work hard because you're not here. And I think that's sort of what leads to this cycle of failure and this feeling of being a failure. Just because you failed a couple times doesn't mean you're a failure. And I think survivorship bias gives people the impression, especially now that so many people can have a platform and so many people, can get on their soapbox or can get on their stage to talk about these successes that they've had, that it's really hard to sift through the bullshit in a lot of ways.
And one of the things about it is the encouragement always. It's this thing that's always a stressor here for us. We don't like it here at Brunch and Budget. Is just to push you to work harder.
Yeah, exactly.
I have a fun secret about working harder. It's easy. It's more effort, but it's an easier thing to take what you're doing and increase your effort, increase your time doing it.
Yeah,
than to actually sit back, analyze, and make a plan that is going to work for you.
Absolutely.
I can say this from experience.
Yeah, totally. And that's one of the things we're going to be talking about today because in this SJO article, essentially, the three things that he names as sort of the actual equation for success is a combination of talent plus opportunities that are given to you plus deliberate practice.
Oh, yeah.
So just going back to what you were saying, Dialect, about like it is easy to just work hard. I know that sounds like a contradiction, right? But it's easy to keep doing the same thing over and over and just do it harder. But without having any analysis of whether or not this is actually working for you, then are you really making progress and are you really getting better?
Well,
right?
and when you were saying opportunities, and a lot of that boils down to luck, being in the right place at the right time. One of the things about working harder, and what I often see in the survivorship bias, is the person who kept doing it in the hopes that someone would notice them, and they lucked out and somebody noticed them. And their advice is, well, just keep doing it and somebody will notice you.
That is literally what I've heard many people say.
And well, I completely understand that they're trying to increase their odds. And one of the
Right.
things about it, just like when we talk about investments, the big problem with trying to put your stuff in that is that you don't have any control over really anything.
Yeah.
You're the constant, just plugging along, doing your thing, and you're hoping a variable pops out of thin air. You're not even doing anything that increases the odds of making that happen.
Right.
And that's the issue, and that's where a lot of us get trapped in.
Right. I mean, it's the whole concept behind The Secret, you know?
yeah.
Right? Let's be real.
Just
it's
keep
like,
doing your thing, and it's going to come
just
to
keep
you.
doing your thing, and keep thinking about manifesting it, and it'll appear. But yeah, if you're not increasing your odds, if you're not analyzing the situation that you're in, and you're not being deliberate about how you're going about this stuff, and we'll talk about some strategies. James Clear actually had a great article with some strategies on it that we'll talk about for what deliberate practice actually means. One of the ways that I really like survivorship bias being explained is this author Gary Smith of Standard Deviations. One of the things he said is it's basically, so he has a hand of cards, a 3 of clubs, an 8 of clubs, an 8 of diamonds, and a queen of hearts, and an ace of spades. And he says the odds of that configuration are 3 million to 1. But because he's looking at the cards, the probability of having these 5 cards is now 1, not 1 in 3 million. And that's how people deal with survivorship bias. It's like, oh, I have them, so this must be true. This must be why. This must
or
be the case.
this must be possible. This must be easily replicatable.
Yeah, and then another example. This was an article in Scientific American. I don't know if you've ever read the book Good to Great. I've read it.
No.
An old boss at an old job told me to read it, and Jim Collins actually he studied 11 companies out of 1,400 companies who beat the stock market average over 40 years. And he basically kind of reverse engineered what characteristics he thought accounted for their success. And Smith, the author of this book, Gary Smith, was like, the author of Standard Deviations, Not Good to Great. He was like, well, if he really wanted to do a real scientific study, he should have predicted which 11 companies he thought were going to do well based on these characteristics and not just decide after the fact that this was why. And the hilarious part of it, I read this book.
Right. I see the process. Right.
Circuit City was on the list of the 11 companies that went from good to great and then went bankrupt in 2008.
Well, I mean, it was great, I guess, for the rest of the market.
Yeah. So 6 out of these 11 companies actually underperformed from 2001 to 2012 because, again, Jim Collins went from, hey, these companies are already successful, let's figure out why from there.
So it's more like they went from I to meh.
Yeah, exactly. That's his next book, I guess.
Temper your expectations.
Temper your expectations. Exactly. Well, and that's the thing about looking at stuff in hindsight, right? You're always right in hindsight. That's basically what survivorship bias is, looking back on all these things, I'm able to tell you that this is what worked when, that's not actually what worked. That's just what happened.
Well, and the point of it, even if you stumbled upon a path that was good, we've seen time and time again in all of the things that we do, if you don't have a plan, if you don't understand what the plan is, you're not in control of it.
Right.
And that's
Exactly.
really the long and short of it.
Yeah. Having a plan and understanding how this plan and all of these components work into a direction that you're going in is super critical.
Let's see how many times this episode I can say, no, it's an accident. Make a plan.
So speaking of plans and accidents, let's jump to a song before we really dive into this formula for success. And he never called it a formula in the article. It ended up being a formula. And I was like, oh, so success doesn't just equal hard work. It equals all of these other things.
Well, that's a good segue because the song is called The Accident Plan. That's not true.
Oh,
It's not-
man.
No, it wasn't that good of a segue. It's okay. We don't have to re-record.
Working on it.
We can keep going. No, actually, this is going to be a little bit different. I normally don't play well-known songs, but I guess this song might not be that well-known here in the States. This is a song that won the West Australia Music Awards in 2016, the first Indigenous artist ever to win this award. And you'll understand why in a minute. It's a song by a cat named Benny Ja, and the song is Survivors, and we'll see you in a minute. Have a bunch of budget. Bonfire Radio.
Well, that solution has been put forward by none other than one of the Premier's closest friends, West Australian mining magnate, Lang Hancock.
Those that have been assimilated into earning good living or earning wages amongst the civilised areas, that have been accepted into society, and they have accepted society and can handle society, I'd leave them well alone. The ones that are no good to themselves and can't accept things, the half-caste, and this is where most of the trouble comes, I would dope the water up so that they were sterile and would breed themselves out in the future, and that would solve the problem.
It's time, Australia. Time for recognition. See, before our dark past, we had a black history. Now, I ain't pointing no fingers and I ain't pushing no blame. I ain't silly. But what's happened in the past is time for recognition and work together. It's like this. They rather compensate us than give us recognition. In other words, they rather buy you out of your tradition. Cause when you recognize, that's how your culture survives. Many millenniums and thousands of tribes around the fire like a robbery. The writings of walls, it's like the troops in the past. They would rather us all dead, but we survivors. Through the spirit of my ancestors, thousands of years from behind us, yeah, that's survivors. Through the ignorance and arrogance that miseducation divides us, product of environment. Before all the grogs and the drugs, it was dreams that would guide us. Now we're stuck in violence, prison system confine us. Genocide undercovers the stolen kids under silence. No wonder we tyrant, revolution is now. Australia can't stop us, we taking back what is ours. Genocide, it was genocide. See the pain in my people's eyes. Steal my culture, deny my pride. But we survived, better recognize. Genocide, it was genocide. See the pain in my people's eyes. Steal my culture, deny my pride. But we survived, better recognize. They wanna breed out the pedigree, close down communities, broadcast the negative and highlight the bigotry. Yeah, they wanna white out our history with no recollection, just a white man's legacy. Don't believe me, ask Lad Hancock. Yeah, that's Gina's father, had a plan to poison the lot. You wanna stop the sons and daughters, put some poison in their water, then you wait a generation and peg out the lot. Now that's iron ore pimpin', iron ore pimpin'. Blood on the hands from these iron ore victims. Fuck Barnett, the government systems. Throw a little dollar, call it royalty for regions. Yo, this is black man's land. Always has, always will be black man's land. Over 70,000 years walking this land, and Cook came and went. Now we living in a genocide, it was genocide. See the pain in my people's eyes. Steal my culture, deny my pride. But we survived, better recognize. Genocide, it was genocide. See the pain in my people's eyes. Steal my culture, deny my pride. But we survived, better recognize.
Years my ancestors from this desert landscape. Brother and sister, I still love you. I'm a voice for the indigenous, the lyricist, the spiritualist. Years my ancestors from this desert landscape. Brother and sister, I still love you.
They must have thought they see aliens when them convict ships come sailing in. Crooks galore, criminal minds hit the shore. Guns go banging, their bodies hit the floor. Invaded, taken, raping, enslaved, chained, oppressed, still we survivors. Yeah, hear that? We're survivors. Check it, we came from sacred places to racist times. Australia, it's time to recognize we're survivors. Yeah, hear that? We're survivors. Yeah, they'd rather compensate us than give us recognition. In other words, they'd rather buy you out of your tradition. Cause when you recognize, that's how your culture survives many millenniums and thousands of tribes. And that's how it is, Australia. All we're looking for is a bit of recognition. And that's by working together as one and acknowledging the past history and moving forward. It starts at home with us around the dining table, how we teach our kids the next generation. It's all about understanding one's culture and being respectful of one's feelings. And together with that, we can move forward and have a positive Australia. We might have had a dark history, but best believe we've got a bright future.
And we're back. Brunch and Budget, Bonfire Radio. That was Survivors by Benny Bja out of Perth, Australia. Hope I'm not saying his last name terribly. It's a B-J-A-H and them consonants all mashed together. I don't know nothing about nothing. But today we're talking about survivorship bias. If I had pronounced it perfectly, I would be running seminars on how to perfectly pronounce anyone's name from any region.
Yeah, and success. You just work hard at that business idea and it'll happen, right?
I just worked hard at saying stuff.
Oh my God. Yeah, there we go. That's a new business idea right there. So survivorship bias. And I feel like the thing about survivorship bias is I feel like it is a survivor instinct in a lot of ways, and a survivorship instinct, because the idea that you don't have control over what's going to happen next or whether or not you're going to be successful is like kind of frustrating, overwhelming, and scary. And I can see why people want to know the answer.
Well,
Want to look to people who are successful and say, oh, tell me the formula.
I mean, isn't it a human nature to follow what works?
Yeah, absolutely. And unfortunately, real life doesn't work like that, because what works for one person is a confluence of so many things besides the work that they did and the work that they put in themselves. One of the things, so going back to this formula that success equals talent plus opportunities plus deliberate practice. One of the things that Sol Orwell mentioned in his article is that, you know, he has relatives in Pakistan who are way more smart and way more talented than him, and he's 100 times more successful than them just by being in America.
Yeah,
that's a big opportunity.
That's a big one. I mean, I can definitely think about people in my family who are smarter, way better than me, people I knew growing up, and they just didn't have the opportunities I did.
Yeah, same with me. Same with like family in the Philippines, you know. It is, part of it is being here, and then there's another layer of being in America. There was this article in The Atlantic called "Escaping Poverty Requires Nearly 20 Years with Nothing Going Wrong." Woo! And you know, the reason why we spend time talking about the racial wealth divide.
That's real.
That's real, right?
No, like, just thinking anecdotally, that sounds about right.
Yeah. Yeah, your entire childhood has to go pretty much right. Like, you have to have a plan that leads you essentially on this path to success. And then you have to get through college, you know? One of the things that he said that I thought was this is basically a guy who wrote a book, and The Atlantic covered it and talked about it. MIT economist Peter Temin. Basically, economic inequality gives us two distinct classes, and only one of them has power. And one of the things that he said was basically things that we talk about all the time. There is this FTE workers, so finance, technology, and electronics. They make up about 20% of the population, and it's this upper class level of workers, and they've strategically created policies like low minimum wage, business-friendly deregulation to bolster success of their group and not others. And I mean, this largely happens along racial lines. You can't talk about economics without talking about race, right?
I'm saying, can't talk about race without talking about economics.
Yeah, exactly. And so here's the thing is, he says one of the ways to get out of the lower group and into the higher one of the keys is education. But that means starting as early as you possibly can, early childhood all the way through college, basically a 16 to 20 year plan that has to go exactly right. And we've heard the story so many times. We've seen it so many times. Malcolm Gladwell, in his podcast Revisionist History, talked about this kid named Carlos, who basically he was a foster care kid, and was super smart and was really good in school and got good grades. And then I think there was a story about him one day just like checking out and like not really being in it. And they found out it was because his shoes were too big, and he felt embarrassed by that. Like all of those little things of like, unless you're really paying attention to that kid and knowing like that's why, has nothing to do with grades, has nothing to do with, you know, the high level things that we think about, like the ability and, you know, the support from his teachers. It's like his shoes were just too big, and he, as a teenager, felt embarrassed by it.
Well, I mean, it's sort of like the prospect of life, right? It takes a whole bunch of coincidences to create life in any capacity, and anything going wrong along that path, then we don't get it.
Yeah.
It just follows that model.
Yeah, absolutely. And so all of the things sort of the author Peter Temin mentions, mass incarceration, housing segregation, disenfranchisement, all of these things take away people's opportunities and make it that much harder for people to be successful. Like, if we are taking the formula of success as talent plus opportunity plus deliberate practice, opportunity is one of the big X factors and one of the things that systematically has been taken away from people. And this is why we have this like upper and lower class system here in general, is because opportunity isn't equal here. No matter what anyone says or what anyone thinks, these bootstrap stories that we hear all the time are the anomalies. It's survivorship bias.
Well, I mean, though frowned upon, nepotism is one of the biggest things that we do. And whether it's blood family or the people around us, it's the thing that keeps systems going. It keeps systems insular, and it's how a lot of systems run.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, we don't really have control over opportunities. We don't really have control over talent. Talent is something that can be honed with deliberate practice, and there's like multiple schools of thought on like, if someone can get good at something, can you get good at everything?
I've always felt personally that talent is not a thing. That the only talent is like tall or some other sort of physical or genetic disposition. I mean, there are mental dispositions as well that make you more inclined to things.
Right.
But for the most part, talent for any specific particular thing, as long as your body and mind meets the requisite requirements, yeah, I think you can swing it.
Yeah. I mean, and there's other schools of thought where they don't think that, where it is a matter of, you can't be a genius at everything, but there is a genius in you that you can tease out.
Well, I feel similarly. You can't be a genius in everything, but you can be a genius in
the things that you want to be a genius
a
in.
thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Not anything, but you could be a genius in a thing.
In a thing, yeah. And part of it is, you know, that practice and that deliberate practice, right?
Well, to digress a little bit, I mean, my whole thing with what you do in talent is it's what you've always been doing. It's the thing you're most inclined to do. It's what you gravitate towards.
Right.
I always tell people I've been performing since I was a kid. I was the kid who knocked over the lamp and was like, oh, no, I knocked over the lamp because there was dragons and they came by and I fought them off and I'm a hero and all that. I was making up stories. I've always been performing. Singers have always been singing. Teachers have always been teaching. Mathematicians have always been computing.
Right.
And I think the whole talent and the finding the thing, which I think is we're coming from the same point from a different perspective, is finding that thing that you always do and continue always doing it.
Right. And I feel like leaning into that is really important versus trying to deny it or trying to want something else. We talk about tendencies a lot. And the things that you are drawn to and the things that, you know, come naturally to you, we call it talent, but part of it is just this innate ability to or like the thing that you enjoy doing and you're passionate
Well,
about.
and we call it talent because it seems otherworldly when other people
Right.
do it because we don't share it.
Right, exactly.
You
And
do
it feels
anything long
natural
enough.
to us.
I always notice when athletes talk about, when I moved up from the college to the pros, it was really tough figuring it out for a while. But, after a minute, the game slows down. And I didn't really understand that because I'm not an athlete.
Yeah.
So the game is always fast to me.
Yeah.
I'm like, whoa, running and people flying balls. Yeah, it's too much craziness. But when I started rhyming and I started really getting into my thing, I remember finding moments when I'm in the cypher, when I'm out there performing, when the game does slow down, literally.
Right.
And I feel like I'm more able to make decisions quickly because everything around me is moving slower, literally.
Wow. It's like you're the Flash.
Right. And everybody who hones their thing gets to that point.
Right.
And it looks like it's magic to everybody else.
Yeah. But really, it was just you doing it every day.
Yeah.
Muscle memory.
Well, that's the hard work part.
Right. Right. That's the deliberate practice part of it, right? So one of the things that I love this line about hard work. Hard work is a necessary condition for success, not a sufficient one.
That's a great way to put it.
Yes.
I feel like
Sol Orwell, yes.
because I feel like sometimes we are like, no, don't work hard. Like that's not the point.
It's a prerequisite.
Yeah.
Hard work is the prerequisite for success. It is really putting in the time, putting in the effort. And I want to spend some time on what deliberate practice is and what deliberate practice really means. James Clear has a couple great articles on it. He is a pretty popular blogger, and he talks a lot about building small habits. And that's kind of the basis of a lot of deliberate practice, is building habits and also understanding that repetition is not the only key to mastery. Deliberate practice is more than doing it over and over and over for that 10,000 hours rule that I'm sure we've all heard, right?
Right.
Yeah, so it's much more than that. And the biggest thing about deliberate practice is there needs to be a system in place where you understand the progress that you're making. And you can also pinpoint where you're not making progress. So you can, just shoot a basketball 50 times or whatever it is, or you can play
Right.
chess 100 times. But if you have no idea how to get better at it, or why you're continuing to lose or not beating your opponent or not hitting the shots, and you're not analyzing yourself, then practice is nothing.
Well, I think isn't that why athletes, they will train with like a bunch of trainers and coaches and other third
Yeah.
parties watching them? Because to take your basketball shooting a jump shot thing, if I'm shooting it wrong, then that becomes my muscle memory, and it's even harder to unlearn that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the biggest keys to having deliberate practice work is getting feedback. So it's exactly what you said. It's getting that coach. It's figuring out what you can measure. It's figuring out, and this is why we rely on things, even in losing weight, like rely on things like the scale, and why that number is something that we hold on to, right? It's,
Well,
are we making progress? Is it going in the direction that we want it to?
This is why musicians have open mics.
Mm.
And I'll tell you, I've always felt like I'll take open mic musicians over studio musicians in any genre any day. I've seen it all throughout the years. That person you meet, they see you at the jam doing your thing. They're like, oh, yeah, I do music too. Come check me out in the studio. What they do sounds like it works in a room to them.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Right.
And it doesn't work for everybody else.
Right.
'Cause they haven't bounced it off everybody else and gotten the feedback and adjusted.
Right, absolutely. So that's a really good point. And that's a great way to practice. Like, if you're trying to practice something, is there an external place for you to practice it in front of, with the understanding that that this isn't gonna be perfect, and this isn't gonna be exactly right, and it's not gonna come out the way that you want it to come out.
Well, I mean, it doesn't always have to be a public performance if we're talking across everything, but there's got to be a way for you to audit yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the first thing in terms of you trying to figure out what you want to get better at, or, you have a business idea and you want to figure out if you're making progress on it, is you have to figure out what you're actually measuring. This is why we talk about why it's so important to have cash flow projections and 12-month cash flow projections, so that you can measure month by month whether or not it's growing in the way that you predicted that it would grow. Because that's one way to see if it's working, and that's one way to help you decide if what you're doing is working.
Well, and like on the hard work thing, to say like doing more of a thing, if you're listening to this right now and you're like, oh, okay, I'll do more of the thing, but I don't know how to measure it because I don't know what the outcome is supposed to be from that. But the direct outcome is, well, then maybe that's not what you should be doing more of.
Right. Right, exactly. So if you don't have an understanding of what you need to measure, then that's the first thing that you need to figure out.
Because, when I think about what we're just talking about, we're often relating it to your skill. And if the hard work is you getting better at your skill, that's not necessarily going to move your career forward or jumpstart what you want to do with your skill.
Right. Right, exactly. And I mean, that's such a great point, because if you're practicing the wrong thing,
we're not even practicing the wrong thing. If you're practicing the thing that you already have at the point where you should be sharing it, you should be doing something with it. If, to take it back to the basketball one, if you're really good and you haven't tried out for any teams, you're just sitting there shooting the ball in a gym by yourself.
And how do you even know you're really good?
Well, the point of it is, even if you're really good, say it's all working.
Right.
Everything is working well. You're practicing perfect. You've done a great job. You've assessed you've done it, but you haven't done anything with it.
Yeah, then it doesn't matter.
And it's something that a lot of us, especially I see creatives do. They fall back on, I'm just going to generate a whole bunch of stuff because I can, and it's going to be practice, and I'm going to keep making great stuff, often chasing the dragon of making the perfect piece of work.
Wow, that's so real.
What do people say, like the great American novel or whatever you're trying to make, the perfect song. You're like, yeah, if I keep doing this and I just keep honing my skill rather than trying to market my skill and make a living for myself where I have enough time to decide how much time I want to spend devoted to honing my skill and playing around with it, I'm just going to keep grinding at my skill until one day a diamond is going to pop out and I'm going to have that song, that book, that recipe, that idea that's going to be so undeniable, everyone's going to love it. And that's where survivorship bias really hits you.
Yeah.
Because you're thinking about that one person, or you're thinking about maximum 50 people out of billions of people who had that one great idea.
Yeah. That came out of nowhere, that everyone paid attention to. That's not how it happens in real life.
Well, the funniest thing about it is, like, when we talk about the survivorship bias, we never talk about the connections, especially when half the time when you look at it, it's not even like really, it's in the second paragraph. They're like, oh yeah, the guy who started Facebook started it at Harvard. Right? It's not like he was in some like network of old computers hooked up by cables, testing it out on people.
Yeah, no.
Randomly asking passerby, hey, would you like a profile? Come get a profile.
Yeah.
These great ideas, these perfect gems, these awesome songs, these great books, they require agents. They require people who get people into the right hands.
Yep.
The great work that you create, even if I know artists who've made 5 or 6 of those perfect gems, and I've heard it and been like, wow, I wish I knew who to give this to.
Yeah.
This would do it for you.
Yeah, exactly. But you haven't told anyone that it exists.
Well, not even haven't told anyone that it exists, because I don't want to make it sound like it's all that easy either.
Yeah.
Like, oh, then just start telling folks.
Oh, yeah, just start telling.
Put up a Bandcamp page, sucker. No, it's not like that. It's the thing of it is the hard work, the effort, and the time. A lot of it needs to be spent on honing your craft and creating the thing that you want to create. But then, as I've found, not my favorite part, and not a part I'm good at all, so please trust me, I'm not speaking from any sort of lofty place about this. But it is so important also to recognize, first of all, to recognize your opportunities, take advantage of them, and be just as diligent about taking advantage of and finding ways to control your opportunities as it is to making sure you have all the greatness in the thing that you're doing. It sucks, y'all.
It sucks.
Because,
that's the worst.
I'm telling you, it would be so awesome if I could just sit there in my drawers making songs and then somebody bursts through my door like a non-racist Kramer and says, "You, this,
We choose you.
yeah, right." maybe now with the Pokemon Go, someone will just walk in the house and choose me, and I'll be snapped up to go into the Pokemon tournament of success.
Oh my god. Oh man. Maybe that's the direction we're headed in, y'all. No? Okay. Then we have to do it this way.
I'm just saying, like, well, and this is how the survivorship bias thing gets insidious.
Yeah.
Because it plays with what your plan is going to be, and it tricks you into creating false benchmarks. And it
So how do we prevent ourselves from creating false benchmarks? Or is that a question that you should be asking me, or
Well-
we should be asking someone else? Because damn.
well, and this week's expert is
Well, here's
There's
the thing.
nobody else in
In,
the
in my experience, at
studio.
least from what I've seen,
Vinyl?
is vinyl. Come on. Well, from my experience, what I've seen is you have to have a variety of benchmarks available to you. There's this thing called vanity metrics in the startup world. They call it vanity metrics because a lot of people like to measure Facebook likes or Twitter followers or, Instagram followers. And is that actually translating to sales? Is that actually translating to people paying more attention to your work? Is that actually translating to you getting better? And so that's the thing I think is very important to watch out for when you are measuring is this a measurement of you making progress, or is this a measurement of you patting yourself on the back? And I think that's a very important distinction to make. And so don't just have one benchmark. Don't just have one thing that you're measuring either. Measure multiple things from multiple angles, and also know that the measurements that you're making are going to change. And at the beginning, it's all going to be an experiment, and you might not have any idea what you're supposed to measure.
so I got a question that it's going to be long and windy.
Okay,
So-
I'm ready.
So we still want to know what the people who are successful are doing. We still want to
Yes.
look at their methods. Listening to everything you're saying, I still feel like not even speaking for other people, I need a standard to look up to. I think that's still helpful for me.
Absolutely.
And so what do I do to make sure, because the first thing I was thinking when you were talking about making sure you have a bunch of benchmarks was, well, they often tell us to pick a person who's doing what you do and is successful in it, and look at what they've done and try to emulate those things. And a little bit of that has the survivorship bias to it.
Right.
But is there a way to look at the benchmarks they were at and then ask the question, first dig into their stuff. Here's a benchmark they have.
Right.
Maybe it's a benchmark I want to have. How did they get to that benchmark? What opportunities were there? Are those things that I can create? Are those things that were innate to that person? And then choose your benchmarks in relation to this model that you've seen, but not in a way that's biased.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think there's a couple ways to look at that. One is I would try and look at multiple people who you want to emulate or who you're working in the same direction as that they went. So don't just count on one person, because then you'll definitely have some survivorship bias going on there.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah, and the other thing too is to understand that even if you look at multiple people and you take some of their benchmarks and you find the commonalities, you may still fall in this good to great fallacy, right? That we talked about earlier of looking at these 11 companies and kind of reverse engineering what worked for them.
Right.
So also understand that based on your personal situation, the opportunities that you have for yourself, and timing, when I say timing, I even mean what decade we're in and what year we're in, right? When you
So if it's not the right decade, look, it's 2017. You only got 3 more years.
Yeah.
Just chill for a minute.
Exactly, just
Wait
wait
it
it
out.
out. No.
Hey. Jinx.
Yeah, right. But you also need to take these benchmarks that you see other people using with a grain of salt and understand that some of them will work for you and some of them won't, and you will be creating your own benchmarks. And the best way to really know what those are is to just do it and learn from experience. And that's shitty to people want a formula. You want to know what the path is and you want to know the direction you're going in. But I can't tell you that what I've done is going to work for everybody. because there's so many other factors besides, well, first I measured this thing, and then I measured this thing, and then I measured this thing. I think the best thing to do is to hear ideas and not take them as fact.
Oh, okay. So what do we take them as?
As another point of reference to add to your tool belt, essentially. I think that when you're trying to create something and when you're trying to practice something and generate something new in the world, you have to assume that there's no real precedent for it. It's going to be different from what anyone else has ever done. And part of you wanting to dive into that world is to take into account the fact that you are going into territory that is uncharted.
And I guess even if what you're doing is something that a lot of people have done and you're not really flipping up or changing the game, your experience is always going to be different.
Absolutely. And yeah, like I said, the opportunity, the timing, all of that stuff is going to be 1,000% different. Like, if Facebook started now in 2017 based on everything else that's happened, who knows what it would look like? I mean, even look at like J.K. Rowling trying to put out a novel under a different name and how that didn't work.
Yeah, that didn't work out quite as well as it did for Stephen King.
Right, exactly. Because timing, talent, opportunity, whatever it is, right?
Yo, and it's so funny because I heard people who were mentioning that thing, and I remember as a kid I was always confused by the Stephen King, Richard Bachman, and all that, and I really bet that a lot of that was luck.
Mm-hmm.
That people saw it on the shelf, they picked it up, it ended up being liked for the same reason that Stephen King accidentally blew up.
Yeah.
He did it twice.
Yeah, he did. So
he's also really good at writing.
Yeah. So
but
there's
that's not
talent
why.
in there. Yeah, but that's not why, especially for something creative like that. So let's go to another Survivor song while we think about how to survive.
All right. Well, we're going from Perth, Australia to Louisville, Kentucky with Cypher Divine, spelled without any vowels. That's CPHRDVN. I'm assuming it's Cypher. No, they say it's called Cypher Divine. And that's with our song Survivors, and we'll catch you in a minute. Brunch and Budget, Bonfire Radio.
Switch it up. Cypher Divine, let them know who we are. Oh, yeah.
We're the black survivors. We're gonna leave the hood behind us. The world is out, you can't deny us. Black survivors. Black survivors. Black survivors. Mystery, how people still believe in history. Blistery, New England of the 30. Mystery, how people still believe in history. Blistery, New England weather the 30. Mystery, how people still believe in history. Blistery, New England weather the 30. Mystery, how people still believe in history. Blistery, New England weather the 33rd degree. Me, I've had the answer hidden inside of me. It troubles me to see children are targeted at infancy. The infantry taking their shots at their immunity. Community, sheep leading sheep. This shit ain't new to me. I have known all along what I am meant to be. So naturally, I understood the path in front of me would not be peaches and cream or homemade apple pie. Time to make a decision, so it's do or die. Funny how change of perception could change your point of vision. Gaining knowledge of self, I'm losing my religion. Pigeons still being eaten while you move on to chicken. Is there really a difference? Cut you a finger licking stricken. With nutricide, you feed your soul with toxins. Why I regenerate cheap? The animals are flocking, plotting their revolution. Watch out, gorillas stalking. Watch out, gorillas stalking. We're the black survivors. We're gonna leave the hood behind us. The world is out, you can't deny us. Black survivors. Black survivors. Black survivors.
Amazing the way the populace keeps on craving. Amazing the way the populace keeps on craving. Amazing the way the populace keeps on craving. The slavery, freedom and planet deep inside. Amazing the way the populace keeps on craving. The slavery, freedom and planet deep inside of me. A legacy passed down from my ancestry. African family, our greatest technology. It saddens me when we don't fulfill our destiny. Incredibly, we survived the conditioning. Zombies roaming microchip society. It was foretold in ancient prophecies. The media lies got minds on lock and key. When hit with the truth, when niggas duck and flee. Like an abbot, I sit awaiting patiently for the next student to appear in front of me. Miraculously, the universe, it gave birth to me residually. No more questioning the truth between the sea. Similar to the roots
off a willow tree. Alpha and Omega, don't try and come and shake we. Cypher divinity, cypher divinity, cypher divinity, cypher divinity, cypher divinity, cypher divinity. Yeah.
We're the black survivors. We're the black survivors. We're the black survivors. We're the black survivors. We're gonna leave the world behind us. The world is ours, you can't deny us. Black survivors. We're the black survivors. We're the black survivors. We're the black survivors. We're the black survivors.
And we're back. Brunchy Budget, Bonfire Radio. That was Cypher Divine with Survivors.
Survivors. And today we're talking about survivorship bias. So,
Because, if all these artists, with their songs being played, they'll just be like, we'll just make a song about something that they're going to play, they're going to talk about.
Yeah.
And Brunchy Budget. That's all you got to do.
and then they'll put you on.
Look, you just got to think about all the words that talk about money or stuff that might be related to money. Put that in your title, and it'll end up on the radio show.
I mean, it has to be good too, right?
Maybe. I don't know.
And you have to be in the right frame of mind.
Dialect has to like
Dialect
it.
has to
you
like
have to,
it.
You have to find something. You have to learn things about dialect. You have to become dialect's friend.
That's one way to fast track, actually.
Take long walks along piers. Get on a Ferris wheel with them.
The Ferris wheel, you're definitely getting on the podcast if you get on a Ferris wheel with dialect.
We should do an episode from a Ferris wheel.
I'm down. Let's do it. This year's portable. Let's go. Okay, so the reason why we wanted to talk about survivorship bias is because, hey, if things aren't working and you look at someone else and you're like, why is it working for them? What are they doing right that I'm not doing? The reality is they won't even be able to tell you at the end of the day. We can all take our best guess on why something is successful and why something fails. And yes, it is a combination of talent and practice and opportunity. And so much of it is out of our hands, honestly.
Well, I don't want to say nobody's going to be able to tell you how they got there, because some people have a pretty good idea of how they got there. I think what we're talking about is looking out for, I think on both sides of it, whether you're the successful person or whether you're the person looking up to successful people, is looking for the telltale signs of whether they understand what they're doing.
Right.
And I think the I just worked hard type of thing is when they either don't know what they're doing or they don't want to share.
Yes. That's so good. Yes.
I want to keep going with our basketball metaphor, because then you know this about after the game athletes, right?
Oh, yeah.
You come up and you talk to some athletes and they're like, so why did you guys win the game today? And they're like, I just played hard, and the ball went in, and I give it up to the other players, and right?
Yeah.
You've heard plenty of those interviews, and then you'll hear the one cat who used to be the one who's the captain or the one who ends up being the coach after they retire, and they're like, oh well, we won the game because around the 6-minute part I noticed that these guys were a little bit loose, so we switched off on the guys, and after that sort of worked. So then we built a little bit of lead, and we kept that off by bringing in the guy on the bench we usually don't play, and then it's all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And all of these details. And when people don't give you details, this is like our issue with the Day Job Army. We've been trying to find, well, not that we haven't found, but we've been digging for people who are going to give us the real, and the real is not in vagaries. The real is in the details.
Yeah. What specifically have people been able, and that's how you know that someone has thought about their work and the path that they've taken. That's how you know that they've been deliberate about everything in a lot of ways. And that's how you can avoid meeting people who have survivorship bias, who have this idea that, oh, they just worked hard and that's how they figured it out. Oh, I just pulled myself up by my bootstraps.
Well, I mean, and the point of it is, if you're doing well, don't think that your hard work alone was the thing that got you there. If you're mentoring someone or talking to somebody who does need to do some more effort, then that's one thing. But don't think that other people are doing worse because you worked harder than them.
Yeah, and honestly, the phrase work hard is just as useful as exercise more and eat less.
Right.
It means nothing. oh, just save more and spend less and you'll be fine. It means nothing. And it's this sort of like blanket statement that people say when they don't understand what they're doing and they don't understand how they got there. So yeah, survivorship bias.
Yeah.
Watch out for it. Watch out for, especially when someone tries to sell you something because of it. I think that's the other thing that we want to leave you with is there's a lot of people who have either become successful and want to sell you on their success, or they're feigning success and saying that they have the answer for you. And survivorship bias is something when we see people standing on a platform in front of a crowd of people and telling them how they made it, we have this idea of like, oh, okay, so if I just do that, then I'll make it too. And we need to watch out for that because everyone's experience is different. Everyone's opportunity, timing, situation, luck, all of that kind of stuff. We sometimes don't have control over how this happens or why it happens. So think about what you can control. Be deliberate in how you practice. Be deliberate in how you make progress. Understand your limitations and your special talents. And recognize, like Dialect said, the opportunities that are afforded to you and figure out a way to nurture those as much as possible.
Yeah, all easier said than done.
Yeah, of
I
course.
guess it's, keep grinding, but don't let it grind you down, and make sure that you always pick your head up and look around.
Ooh, always rhyming. We should end on that.
Speaking of
you.
always rhyming, we got another rap song that we'll finish you out with. It's another song called Survivor. This time we're taking it down to Alabama with Kalaya. I think this was produced by DJ N8 of Dub Section. It's a little hip-hop dub mixiness, and we'll check you next week. Bunch Budget, Bonfire Radio. Peace.
Don't get it twisted up, don't get it twisted. Don't get it twisted up, don't get it twisted. Don't get it twisted up, don't get it twisted. Don't get it twisted up, I'm a survivor. Don't get it twisted up, don't get it twisted. Don't get it twisted up, don't get it twisted. Don't get it twisted up, don't get it twisted. Don't get it twisted up, I'm a survivor. 16 scars for 16 bars. Got 16 spots for 16 cars. Now when I run around, you wonder who I are. See, I'm the biggest boss that you've seen thus far. Years in the making, time steady taking. Studying the game in the front and the faking. A go-getter, buddy, I'm getting it in. I come like a thief in the night and take flight. Is that right? I got them shaking in they shoestrings. Brand new look, I'm changing the game. I lit the flame, the beats they bang. And everybody out there know my name. Sing. Don't get it twisted up, don't get it twisted. Don't get it twisted up, don't get it twisted. Don't get it twisted up, don't get it twisted. Don't get it twisted up, I'm a survivor. Don't get it twisted up, don't get it twisted. Don't get it twisted up, don't get it twisted. Don't get it twisted up, don't get it twisted. Don't get it twisted up, I'm a survivor. You can't stop my goal, you can't stop my rise to the top like dough. I said it one time and I said it before, and I say it again for those that don't know. I used to hang out with them brothers at the corner store, dropping bones saying, brother, what they hitting for? To the moon when my feet hit the door. But they said I didn't have no flow. What? The brother said I couldn't do it no more, but I'm in the limelight, holding the mic tight. Work the vocal cords and it sounds right. You know I do this, you know I'm true to this. I look around at the bullish, I pull this wool off the top of the eyes of my people. Sequel gave you something that you can see through. I'm a survivor. Don't get it twisted up, don't get it twisted. Don't get it twisted up, don't get it twisted. Don't get it twisted up, don't get it twisted. Don't get it twisted up, I'm a survivor. Don't get it twisted up, don't get it twisted.
Don't get it twisted up, don't get it twisted. Don't get it twisted up, don't get it twisted. Don't get it twisted up, I'm a survivor. Stacks of shows like stacking up peanuts. Do another show for free, you must be nuts. I climbed no penthouse stand for them suckers. Even when the bug ass thought no was above them. I gave chase, ran out on a rat race. With a smile all over my face. Little better stay in your place. Like Muddy, I got my strap, we're gonna catch a case. Amplify my voice so you can hear her. But on the microphone, get it at home. Stumble through the door, tell them daddy's home. They say my flow is weak, my flow is full grown. Got a twist to think that it was just porn. Check a deuce, and I leave you alone. You can still buy my tunes with your iPhone. I'm a survivor. Don't get it twisted up.